Welcome to this Java Break with Basis. Today is the first of a four-part series on how version 11 improves your bottom line. Our topic for today is database and file replication, probably the one feature within BBJ 11 that's going to be the most to your and your customers' bottom line. Let's look at the agenda. We're going to look at how database and file replication improves your bottom line. We'll talk about how it works, what this new feature costs, and what the benefits are of the feature. And then we'll take your questions at the end of the session. Firstly, let's talk about database and file replication. The question that you have to ask yourself and you have to ask your customers is, what is the state of their business continuity plans? Are they prepared for any potential disaster that might befall them? What about human dependencies? Is their recovery plan dependent upon a person to do a backup of the data and make sure that data is kept securely off-site in case something happens to the on-site premises of the operation? Is that current backup location that they place the data in safe? Not so long ago, I had the opportunity to visit with one of our customers, and they were struggling with the fact that their backup recovery site was actually in the same valley that was potentially at risk to flooding as their primary site. So that meant that their backup site had the exact same vulnerability as their primary site to a flood. Therefore, that's an important consideration. Where is your data going to be residing should you have a disaster at your primary site? And is that secondary site secure? Is that current backup readable? When last did you actually try and recover from your backup? Have you checked those tapes? Have you checked that recovery site? Is it functional? Do you have live or do you need live access to your production data outside of your production system? Can your customer survive the loss of their data? And if so, what's it going to cost them? I firmly believe that this new feature in BBJ 11 overcomes all of those concerns that one might have about the sanctity of one's data backup. So no data conversion is required if you're running Pro 5 and Visual Pro 5. You can move to the Basis database. That same data file can suddenly be under the control of the Basis database management system. You can continue to access it from Pro 5 and Visual Pro 5, and now you can have access to database replication. It's both efficient and effective. Tape backups, for example, cannot achieve a stateful backup state while users remain logged in. And oftentimes, you don't have enough downtime in the daily operation in order to get a stateful backup of your data to a tape. No downtime is required with the online database and file replication. It's always updating the changes to the replicated site. The integrity of your file rights are preserved. So it's happening at the basis database level versus the operating system level. You can create live backups. They can be off-site, they can be local, or they can be multiple. You can have a mix and a match of off-site and on-site backups of your data. It provides a read-only copy of the database or the data files. You can therefore offload your queries and reports to conserve system resources on the production system. So if those queries and reports, which traditionally don't write to the database, can be run on a read-only database, then this is a great solution to improve the performance of your production system and make sure those queries run optimally and don't potentially bring the production system to its knees should they be inadvertently misconstructed by an end user. It provides the database in closer proximity to an end user group should that end user group be remote from the primary office location. So let's have a look at your choices. Say we're running over here on our primary server and it's running BBJ or Pro 5 or Visual Pro 5. You need to redirect the data to the basis database, so the BBJ is the primary source of that data. You can replicate that on the same machine with a replicated target. It'll become read-only. Or you could do it across a local area network to another machine on your current site, and that'll give you another replicated target only. And you can do both of these or all of these. And finally, you could move this across to a wide area network, either to a cloud machine or to a machine in a different state or in a different location that's not subject to some potential disaster happening to your local site. And all of those three replicated databases here can be kept in sync with your primary source production database. Let's look at Basis International as an example. You may have seen some of our press of late where we've moved our own production servers into the cloud and we're running on the Amazon cloud on the West Coast. So our primary production server resides in the Amazon instance on the West Coast. But you may have noticed, not so long ago, Amazon went down in one of their locations. Fortunately for us, it wasn't the West Coast, it was the East Coast. And one of their instances went down for a period of time. So to obviate that potential problem for ourselves, we've replicated our data to the West, to the East Coast, to Tokyo, and to Ireland. And we're running those replicated databases on micro instances, and they are very inexpensive from Amazon. And you can similarly structure your own database replication on an inexpensive cloud offering or in some other local office of your own that's remote from your primary site. So our database is secure. This gives you a little pictorial representation. So here we are running, as it turns out, although we're based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, our data might reside in Palo Alto, California, on the West Coast servers of Amazon. It's replicated across in Virginia. It's also replicated into Tokyo and to Ireland. Let's talk about some of the replication terminology that you'll come across. Initially, we talk about the source of the data. That's your production server. Those are the directories, the files, and or the database that is being replicated. Your target is the replicated directories, files, and or database on the target side. The replicated jobs or replication jobs need to have a name. You can have more than one job running at the same time. You need to give a name to each of those jobs. The target machine information needs to be provided, the host, the user, the password, whether it's running through the secure socket layer SSL, whether it's using advisory locking, etc. And you need to provide the source to target mapping of database and or directories and files to replicate. So we can replicate specific files or directory in the file side of the replication structure from one machine to another on the same machine, as I showed earlier, on machines in a network or into cloud machines. You can replicate the entire database if it's a basis database, and that'll take the database definitions as well as the data. And this is all completely transparent to the users. No code changes required to your production systems, be they Pro5, Visual Pro5, or BBJ. Thereafter, all changes to the files are replicated to the target sites. So let's look at creating and managing our replication jobs. We can do this through the BBJ Enterprise Manager. There's a quick and easy to use wizard. It uses the familiar user interface that is provided with the Enterprise Manager. Or you can decide to provide your own front end to your business application. By using the BBJ Admin API, you can have the same full functionality that you have from within the Enterprise Manager is now provided to you via the language. So you can programmatically create and manage replication jobs. So you can access that from any BBJ or Java application. This is what a screenshot looks like when you go into the replication job wizard within Enterprise Manager. Well, the first thing you're going to be asked for is whether you wish to replicate directory or files, or whether you wish to replicate a database, a basis database. Further on, we'll look at the information that's provided in the replication tab. You'll see the jobs that are running, the source and the target, and very important information in the last column is when it was last in sync, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. So those replication panels give you very important information. Let's talk now more about last in sync. That's the last time the target was in sync with the source. It'll also tell you whether it's running, the current state of the job. Is it running? Yes. Or is it running? Yes. And is there a pause that's been set? And I'll talk more about pausing in a minute. And of course, the last choice would be no, the job has not been initiated yet. So it's been created, but hasn't actually been started. Now, the pause button. This is really a very powerful feature, a very powerful capability that we put in your hands to determine when you wish a job to be complete, when you wish a job to be paused at various logical times. So the pause button will continue queuing source operations, but immediately stop sending any to the target. The current changes done to the primary, to the source database or the source files, continue being logged in the queue, but they aren't being sent to the target database. Pause when caught up, however, is a slightly different approach. That pauses the job when the target is caught up with all source changes at the time that the button is pressed. So a really classic use case of this may be you've reached a particular time of the month, or time of the processing, where you wish to have a certain time that the data is complete, and you want to quiesce the system. You need to quiesce the system for only a minute, get your users out of the system, hit the pause when caught up button, and then let the users back into the system. Then the replicated database might take a while to be caught up to that same point in time at which you press the pause when you quiesce the system. But now you'll know that the target is at that point, and it'll pause at that point and allow you to do more to that replicated target data as you see fit. Perhaps take a hard copy backup of some other form, be it on tape or be it some other format. So let's talk about the replication wizard. The replication wizard automatically builds the job based, for example, on your database configuration. It populates the source to target mapping with directories defined in the source database. This is using it in the database replication mode. And it creates the replicated database entry on the target. The target doesn't even have to have the database definition defined. It's as simple as selecting the database that you wish to replicate, specifying the new target database name, give it the target host, username and password, and you're off. So here's what the screenshot looks like, and we'll see this in a minute. I'm going to be joined by Jeff Ash, our database engineer, who will take us through a demonstration in a little while of both the file directory and database replication jobs. The BBJ directory and file replication wizard is a little different from the data dictionary based one. You get to select the specific directories and files for replication. You can include any number of directories and or files. And the directory replication will include all files and subdirectories from that point downwards in the tree hierarchy. It's as simple as specifying the target host, user and password, specify the source to target mapping of directories and files to replicate. Let's talk about some considerations. When you're looking at database and or file replication, we need to be sure that all the data must be under BBJ's control, must be running under the basis database. And it's important to remember that there's no data conversion required. Existing M-keyed files, by merely putting them under control of the basis database. So for any Pro 5 or Visual Pro 5 app, it's merely a case of putting Pro 5 and Visual Pro 5 to the data via the BBJ Pro 5 data server syntax. As long as you have the software asset management feature, you're good to go. It will require some additional I/O on both the source and target machines, as you might imagine, and it's going to be dependent on the network bandwidth and frequency of modifications on the source. Let's look at some examples, some good use cases, and talk about some of the benefits of database and file replication. One really good use case would be to back up to an off-site cloud machine. You can install BBJ services on the off-site cloud machine, create a replication job on the source machine that will replicate to the target, and that's all. No additional BBJ license is required for the target cloud machine, as long as you're current on SAM on the primary machine, on the source machine. Let's imagine you wish to take a snapshot of the target to do a backup. You pause the job on the source machine, make the snapshot copy, and then resume the job on the source machine, and you're done. Let's look at a second good use case. Let's imagine you have a data warehouse, and it's a read-only data warehouse. So you want to give management or analysts access to your data, and you want to give them access in the cloud or on a local machine. Do the same steps as example 1 to create the backup. Ensure the target BBJ services points to a license server with a required number of users that you wish to be using against this data warehouse. And then you configure any ODBC or JDBC applications or reporting tools to point to the cloud data warehouse or this remote target data warehouse. Of course, it'll require enough BBJ licenses on the target machine for accessing the data from either BBJ or third-party ODBC, JDBC applications to access your data warehouse. And you can have multiple data warehouses. You can have a data warehouse at each location, a locale, for your remote offices. You can start multiple cloud machines with BBJ services. And you can create multiple replication jobs, much like we've done here at Basis, where we have 3 separate replication jobs running to replicated servers around the world. Some further considerations is that you do require the SAM feature. The Enterprise Edition is required at the source database. It will check out an Enterprise Edition license. And the last in sync concept will only work if you have reasonable network bandwidth and or the frequency of your modifications on your source is such that the target can catch up. So last in sync will only take place if the network bandwidth is sufficient to be able to put it in a synchronized state. Otherwise, it'll always be in a catch-up state. And you cannot use data server syntax when you set up the replication. We recommend the same directory structure on the target machine as the primary machine to avoid any confusion. There will be an added delay to the startup of BBJ services while the replication process verifies the state of the current running jobs. And that's really important because the replication jobs will persist through the restart of BBJ services. During the initial copy, records in the source files cannot be extracted and files cannot be locked. That is in that initial period of time until the base file is copied across. And so we have some strategies that we suggest that you follow to get yourself in a state to have the replicated job, to be in a position to continue running. The target files and directories in database are read-only. That's true throughout. It's obviously a very important criteria. You cannot obviously write to those. They wouldn't become replicated databases if that were the case. Should access to the target fail, the queue will grow on the source machine until the problem is resolved or the job is terminated. All those changes, all those transactions that are destined for the target machine will continue to queue up until such time as either the network connection is re-established or that the job is terminated. And when connectivity is restored, the target will catch up and the queue log files will shrink again. As I said earlier, replication will persist through the restart of BBJ services on both the source and the target. Read triggers need some careful examination. If you are trying to do some writing within a read trigger, that obviously is something that you need to be concerned about and make sure that that writing isn't going to create a cascading event. Write triggers are ignored on the target, as you might expect. Again, we wish to have the two data files in sync, and so we have them move across post the write trigger, and therefore it doesn't make any sense to have write triggers enabled on the target. Encrypted fields are replicated in the encrypted state, and encrypted files require the crypt password entry on the mode field in the target to source mapping within the Enterprise Manager or within your API command. And encrypted files require the mode entry for each file unless all those files in the directory use the same encryption setting. So you'll need to provide each of those encryption keys for each of the different encryption passwords. Let's look at the process of creating a job. Firstly, we recommend you copy all data files to the target machine up front. Either do it via DVD, tape, or FTP. Have everyone stop using the source system, and then shut down BBJ services to admin-only mode and restart BBJ services. You would use rsync to update the target data files so that they match before starting the replication. Any changes that took place after you created this copy to DVD, tape, or FTP would need to be rsynced to those target data files to capture all the changes since the initial write to DVD, tape, or FTP. And then you can create and start the replication job, and it'll keep those two sets of data files or databases in sync. And you'd restart BBJ services in the normal mode and allow everybody back onto the system. So a very brief period of time that you bring your users out of the system. rsync takes place very rapidly across various operating systems to keep the two data sets in sync or put them into synchronized state, and thereafter the BBJ services replication job will keep them in sync. Target files and directories are protected and may not be modified, as we said earlier, and replication occurs record by record for record-oriented and ESQL files. Any activity that causes a change to the source files or directories is written to the log file, and replication configuration is stored in a file called replication.cfg, which is located in the BBJ services startup directory, and that replication.cfg file is encrypted. The log file is kept in the replication directory, so that's where that log file, which will queue up all the changes destined for the target replication site, will be kept in the replication directory. So let's look at a demonstration. Let me hand over now to Jeff Ash to take you through several little demonstrations of data replication.
Creating replication jobs in BBJ is really quite easy. All you need to do is log into the Enterprise Manager, click on the replication node here, click on the Add button, and now we're creating a job. We give you a nice handy wizard here to help you create the job. Our first example here, we're going to look at a directory or file replication where we're going to replicate a simple directory of BBJ or BBX data files. The first thing we need to do is give it a name, and then we need to specify the host of the machine that we're going to replicate to. In this first example, we're going to just replicate to the same computer that we're on now, but you'd put the host name in this box here if it was a different machine. The port is the port that the file system server is running on, and it defaults to port 2000. Then we need to give a username and password that will be used for authentication when it connects to do the replication. If we were using SSL, we would want to put a checkbox here. We are not using that here, so we'll go ahead and leave that unchecked. Or if we were using advisory locking to access those data files, we would need to put a check in the advisory locking checkbox. But what we need to do now is go and select the directory that we want to replicate. And so we're going to use the the Chili database in the program files directory under basis. We're going to select the data directory. Those are the only files we're interested in. And as you can see, it'll add that to the list here, and it'll give you a target. This is on the target machine, in this case the same machine, the location that we want those data files to be replicated to. Under the excluded tab, we can add specific files that we do not want to be included in the replication job. So let's say we don't want to include the dmgg.dat file, so we will add that here. Now anything in this list here will be excluded from the replication job. All that's left to do now is click the next button that creates the job for us. We hit finish, and now our job is running, and we can see that here in the replication jobs list. It tells us if the job is currently running. We can pause a job if we want to stop replicating to the destination for a period of time, and then it will tell us that no, it is not running. When we want to resume that job, click it and click the resume button, and the job resumes its replication. What you'll see here in this list is the job that's being done on the source machine and the list of files or directories. In this case, we're replicating a directory, so list the directory that is being replicated. This item here is telling us that this machine is being used as a replication target. If we were on another machine, which you'll see here shortly, then you would see this information, the target information, on the target machine, and you would only see the source information on the source machine. So it's that simple to get a job going, running. Any changes that are made to any of those files in that directory, or if files are added to that directory or removed, that same operation will happen on the target machine as well. Now we'll look at creating a database replication job. With a database replication job, the data dictionary files and data files will be replicated, and also the database configuration from the source will be copied over to the target machine so that you have a read-only copy of the database available on that target machine. So let's look at getting that set up. Instead of choosing directory and file replication, we'll select database replication, give our job a name, select our source database that we want to replicate. Notice it pulls in all of the information from that database for us automatically. Now on the target, it will be creating a database named Chili Company Replicated. This is the default. You could change this to anything that you desire. Next, we will specify our Amazon cloud machine, because that's where we're going to replicate instead of to the local machine. Give a username and password. Make sure to specify the correct admin server port and file system server port. More than likely the defaults will work unless you explicitly change that yourself on the target machine. If we have the file system server configured to use SSL on the target, we need to put a check mark in this box here. We aren't using that, so we'll leave it blank. The advisory locking setting will be pulled directly out of the source database configuration. So if it's configured to use advisory locking, that will be checked. In our case, it's not, and so that's why the setting is not checked there. So now all that's left to do is to change the paths on our data files and data dictionary files so that they are valid Linux paths, because we're going to be replicating from a Windows box to a Linux box. So let's get our paths changed here. And now we're ready. Now let's go ahead and test our connection. This makes sure that all of our settings are correct. It connected successfully, so we know we're ready to go. Now if we wanted to add any other additional directories or files to this job, we could do so here just as we would with a directory replication job. But we're not going to do that now. You can also add, exclude additional files if you need to as well. But we're going to go ahead and just keep it simple here. Let's move forward. Our job is created now. We hit finish, and we are ready to go. Now what it's doing now is copying the files from the source machine to the target machine. We can take a look here. Notice that when the date and time show up here as last in sync, that means that the databases are synchronized with each other. And so now we're ready to do some things that are kind of interesting. Let's go look at our target machine. Let's refresh this. We'll notice that our target machine shows that a job is replicating to that machine. Let's refresh our database list here, and we'll see that database that was created for us. We can select that database. We can query that database. Notice we get our data there. Now let's go over to our source machine and let's see what happens when we make changes to our database on the source machine. Let's see, let's delete a record from the category table. Notice here my database has one where prodcat equals JJ. Back over here we're going to delete the record from our source. Now notice when we come back over to our target, execute that query, that record's gone there as well. So now both databases are perfectly in sync. We're again on our source machine. Notice the records there match up with the records here. If we add a record to this table, we will also see that records show up over here.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, the only question that might be left in your minds then as to whether you should or shouldn't use database replication might be your consideration of cost. And so what does it cost? Well, nothing. Well, not quite. You need to be current on SAM. So as long as your license is current on SAM, you can continue to use database replication. So let's look at some of those considerations. If you're not current on SAM, how do you get current on SAM? Well, if you're current on SAM, of course, the easiest thing to do is just take fulfillment of version 11 and you're off and running. If you're not current on SAM, you need to proceed with your normal upgrade, or you can get current with our software as a service offering. Now, recently at our TechCon in May, we announced a permanent promotion of an upgrade from a traditional license to a software as a service license. And there's some significant pricing benefits in that step. What does it mean to get current with a software as a service offering? There's substantial savings on license upgrade fees. It'll move it to a subscription license, and it'll include the SAM software maintenance coverage, which is what you need for the data replication capability. The annual renewal process is easy and convenient. We've made it automatic. As long as your server machine is connected to the internet, the SAM renewal process will happen behind the scenes automatically. As long as the SAM fee is maintained, then your SAM renewal will take place seamlessly. So let's talk about the costing, and let's talk about the special offering. Firstly, we're waiving any reinstatement fees. So if you've been off SAM for a period of time, those fees are waived. That's a very substantial saving, up to 12% of the price of the license. If you need to go to the Enterprise Edition, we waive in the cost of going to Enterprise Edition. And if you want to start using our latest Barista RAD tool, then we're also waiving that purchase cost. All you end up paying for is the license upgrade for your Standard Edition users or Enterprise Edition users if you have them. And then you pay SAM for, if you choose Barista and the Enterprise Edition, you pay SAM for those. And then you're off and running. Let me hand over to Paul to talk a little bit more about finding answers to any questions you might have from this or any other Basis technology.
From the Basis.com website, we've made it really easy to find answers to your questions on Basis technology. On every page, we have a Google custom search engine in the upper right. Here we've typed in database replication, today's session, and it brings up a results page. Then you can sub-sort it looking at Basis Docs, our knowledge base section, tutorials, and the other links that you see available. Then we can drop straight into what we talked about today, database replication. And it gives you a lot of detail, way more than we've been able to cover in today's session. We've also formatted it for your mobile device as well. So here we are, and you'll notice the tabs as we move through this. This is looking at Basis on your mobile device. I can flip and do a sub-search on the Basis website into documentation, knowledge base, and tutorials. Now back to you, Nico.
Thanks, Paul. So let's summarize what we've covered in today's session. We've really looked at one of the key benefits and features of version 11 that'll help improve your and your customers' bottom line and keep their systems secure. Database and file replication is probably the most important feature we've added to the Basis product set for many a year. It improves your bottom line by making sure your database is secure, that your backup is secure, that your business continuity plans are in place. We've told you about how it works, we've told you what the costs of the new features are, and we've spoken about the benefits of the feature.
Before we move to your questions, I wanted to point out a couple things coming up on the Basis calendar. First of all is Basis TechCon Canada coming up in Montreal, Quebec on September 19th and 20th. We're presenting that with our partners in Canada, Descor. For information to register, we'd have you contact Manuel Garcia at the email address there on the slide, or give a phone call to 905-470-4033, extension 5404. There's conference and session information also available at the descor.com website. This conference is the best of the TechCon conferences for 2011. What we've done is we've had conferences in Las Vegas and in Germany this year, so this will be our third TechCon. So if you've missed those other two conferences, I'd urge you to take a peek at your calendar to see if you can fit in September 19th and 20th in Quebec. Let's look ahead and see what else we have in store. Our next Java break will be on September 14th, and we will be repeating our lean and mean browser user interface and cascading style sheet session. Then we're going to take a brief pause and come back with a new session on October 5, offering your Basis data and consuming third-party data with Pro5, Visual Pro 5, and BBJ. And now let's take your questions.